Good evening. It's a little bit before 6 o'clock, but we want to just check in with the town of Haverhill. Why don't you unmute Bridget for me, Shelley, and we can check in and
She's
see
now self-muted.
Bridget, it looks like you are self-muted at the town of Haverhill. If you can unmute yourself, we just want to check in and make sure you can hear us and see us. Okay, we're not. Was there another person?
Boucher? Yeah, she's not present at that town office.
Julie, do you have a phone number?
I do, yeah.
You want me to get my cell phone? I'll call it.
Sure. Who you want? I'll get my cell phone.
Well, if you're comfortable passing objects between people.
Why don't you call?
Yeah, there we go.
Everybody can hear me right now, you know that. I'm gonna go out in the hallway and call in so that not everybody can hear me.
So she does look muted on this.
It says that she's self-muted. Do you want to try
Okay.
with the ES employee?
Yeah, let's unmute
Let's try
Gary.
Gary.
He's also self-muted and is muted by an organizer.
Okay, I just unmuted him. Now he needs to unself-mute.
Hi, Gary, can you hear us?
Me? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Gary. Checking
I'm
in.
coming through okay?
Coming
Yes.
through loud and clear. And Barbara's just connecting with the town so that we can get the remote location set up as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Did you hear that, Shelley? She's saying that it says the moderator has muted them.
They're saying that they get a message that says the moderator has muted them.
Maybe mute and unmute.
Attendee is self-muted and is muted by
And
an
we're
organizer.
getting a message that says attendee is self-muted.
Tell her to try now. It worked for Gary.
It says the line can't be muted.
Oh, are you calling in on her phone? Oh, no, that's not. Oh, that's why. If you're calling in on the phone, participate in the hearing. You did, you're supposed to log out using the web, they're calling in on a conference.
Until she needs to
Yeah,
log
you
in with the
You need
computer.
to log in with the computer.
Bridget.
Correct.
Oh, go ahead.
It's just, if I just announced that we're gonna work some things out, this webinar back on hold. We'll check back in shortly.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well,
I
let's
guess
see.
we're going.
What?
We just wondered if we should put the webinar on pause, but are they ready to go in Haverhill?
They are getting logged on using a computer, but they're just gonna have to, they're afraid that we won't be able to hear people using the microphone on the computer. They were using.
Well, we'll have, give the town a few minutes to log in. we'll try that system, make sure that we can hear them, they can hear us.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll get that straightened out.
Yeah, so for everybody else, just hang in there for a little while. Give us a moment to hopefully work out these details. Appreciate your patience.
And I wonder if it would be possible if they could have the computer in a set location and people could, you know, like if we have a microphone in person, people would just come up to the computer and.
That's what they were originally doing with
Yeah.
the phone, but I didn't,
Right.
it didn't click in our minds that that's what they were doing.
Right. Well, it's good they have a computer there.
Yeah. Yeah, because now I see Bridget has logged in
Perfect.
as a second person. And she is muted by the organizer. So try unmuting her.
Did.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay. And you're loud and clear. So however you have the computer, we can hear you clearly.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to mute you now and we're going to start things off, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services public hearing on our draft air emissions temporary permit for renewable fuels by Peterson. We are using the GoToWebinar platform to conduct this online hearing. My name is Barbara Dorschmidt, and I work for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. I will be your host for this online hearing. You will hear from me periodically throughout the hearing as I provide instructions on how you can participate, such as how to ask clarifying questions or provide oral testimony. We will turn on and describe certain webinar functions during the times of the hearing when we are soliciting questions or testimony. Please note that all attendees are muted and have no video feed. You will be able to see and hear DES staff, but neither we nor any other attendees can hear or see you through this online platform. The exception to this will be times during the hearing where individual attendees are unmuted to ask clarifying questions or provide oral testimony. When attendees request to speak, we will call you one at a time and unmute you so that we and all other attendees can hear you. Please note that even when you are unmuted and speaking with us, your video feed will not be transmitted to us or any other attendees. We and all attendees will be able to hear you, but not see you. I will provide more detailed instructions on how to request to speak at points during the hearing where we open the floor for you to ask clarifying questions or provide oral testimony. In addition to the instructions I will provide throughout the hearing, we also have Meg King of New Hampshire DES standing by to help if you need personal assistance. I will read her phone number and email address now, and we will also post it on the screen intermittently throughout the hearing. You can reach Meg by phone at 603-271-6893 or by email at Margaret, margaret.m.king@des.nh.gov. That was a summary of how you will be able to participate in this hearing. Don't worry if you didn't catch it all, you will be hearing from me again later when I provide more detailed instructions. I thank you for joining us and look forward to helping you participate in this online hearing. I'm now going to turn you over to our hearing officer, Sherry Godlewski, who will get us started. Sherry?
Thank you, Barbara. Good evening. For the record, it is 6:08 p.m. on April 27th, 2021. We are at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services office at 29 Hazen Drive in Concord, New Hampshire, for a public hearing on the draft significant amendment to temporary permit TP 0265 for Renewable Fuels by Peterson's biodiesel manufacturing facility in Haverhill, New Hampshire. My name is Sherry Godlewski, and I have been appointed by Craig Wright, Director of the Air Resources Division of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, to serve as the hearing officer for tonight's public hearing. Also representing DES are Todd Moore, Air Permit Programs Manager, Barbara Dorfschmidt, Operating Permits Program Manager, Sheila Rydell, New Source Review Program Manager, Karen Craver, Principal Investigator in our Environmental Health Program, Meg King, Senior State Air Permit Engineer, and Shelley Marshall, Administrative Supervisor. As the hearing officer, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, DES is authorized to conduct this hearing electronically. In addition, we would like to thank Bridget Codling and Jennifer Boucher from the town of Haverhill for providing access to the virtual meeting at the Clifford Memorial Building located at 65 South Court Street, Woodsville, New Hampshire. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the hearing by telephone with additional access by GoToWebinar for this electronic hearing. All participating DES staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting. The meeting link is posted on the DES website at www.des.nh.gov under News and Media. In order to ask questions or provide oral testimony, you will need to join the webinar from a computer or an iOS, Android, or Windows Phone mobile device. While the GoToWebinar platform that DES will be using for this hearing provides capability for attendees to listen in by calling the phone number provided in the registration confirmation, those who join by phone will only be able to listen. Phone audio only attendees will not be able to ask questions or provide oral testimony. If anybody experiences a problem with access, please call Meg King at 603-271-6893 or email Meg at margaret.m.king@des.nh.gov. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with the New Hampshire Code of Administrative Rules, ENVA 200 and ENVC 200. As required by these rules, the proceedings of this hearing are being recorded, and all who speak will be required to state for the record their name and the name of the party they represent, if any, at this hearing. This hearing is being recorded on GoToWebinar and will be posted later this week on the DES website. The purpose of this hearing is to provide information on the draft temporary permit and to receive public comment. Notice of this hearing was published on March 25th, 2021 in both the Union Leader and the Bridge Street Weekly Showcase. The notice indicated that DES would accept comments on the draft permit until today, April 27th, 2021. However, we recognize that an electronic hearing format is relatively new and may be challenging for some, or that technical issues could be encountered during the hearing. For this reason, in accordance with ENVC 205.08, we will keep the record open for written comments for one more week until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. The process of this hearing will be as follows. First, Sheila Rydell will provide a brief presentation on the draft temporary permit. If you are participating via GoToWebinar, slides will accompany Ms. Rydell's presentation. Once Ms. Rydell has finished, we will see if anyone has clarifying questions on the draft temporary permit. We will then proceed to the public testimony portion of the hearing. Barbara Dorfschmidt will first provide a brief overview on how to provide oral testimony via GoToWebinar. We will then start to call in those wishing to testify, as well as the person on deck. Each person will have a 5-minute maximum to speak. After 5 minutes, we will give you a friendly reminder. Questions will be addressed by DES to the extent possible during the public hearing. However, the The purpose of this hearing is to solicit and receive comments. DES will address comments in our final decision. Once everyone who cares to testify has done so, I will close the public hearing. If there are any questions about how we are going to proceed, Barbara can briefly go over how to do so. Otherwise, we will proceed with Ms. Rydell's presentation. Are there any questions about how we are going to proceed?
Move to the next slide. This is Barbara Dorschman again, and this time I'm here to provide instructions on how to ask clarifying questions. We have now enabled the GoToWebinar question function. You can now let us know if you want to ask a question by typing and submitting your name through GoToWebinar. On the slide doc, click on the question box where it says enter a question per staff. All you have to do is type your first and last name. Once this is done, press send. You do not need to type your question into the box. We are just using this function to identify who would like to be called upon to ask a question. You will see a list of attendees who wish to ask a question, and we will call on you one at a time. I will state the name of the first person on the list as well as the next two names. When I turn the floor over to you, we will unmute you and you will be able to ask your question. For the record, we ask that you state your name before answering your question. At this point, does anybody have questions on how we are going to proceed with this hearing? I am not seeing anybody that has questions at this time. I want to quickly unmute. Can you unmute the town of Haverhill? And we can just check in to see if there's anybody there that has a question. It would be
Bridget.
Bridget, yes.
Hello, we have two individuals.
Oops.
Sorry.
We have two individuals in the room who already know they want to provide comment to the board. So after their comments, others in the room might want to as well.
Okay, wait, so when we get to the testimony portion of the hearing, we will open it up for that. But right now, we're just looking for anybody have any questions about how the hearing is going to proceed.
Okay, no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I think at this time we'll again move on to
Sheila
Sheila
Rydell.
Rydell.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Sheila Rydell, and I am a permitting engineer with the Department of Environmental Services Air Resources Division. I am here this evening to give a presentation about a draft temporary air permit for renewable fuels by Peterson. My presentation will focus on the following topics: facility history, the facility description, our temporary permit process, the proposed project, our regulatory review, the emissions review, the temporary permit requirements, and conclusions and next steps. White Mountain Biodiesel was issued temporary permit TP-0021 to construct a biodiesel manufacturing facility on November 10, 2009. White Mountain Biodiesel began producing biodiesel in January of 2011. A joint EPA-DES inspection was conducted on December 3, 2015. And this inspection identified the applicability of additional environmental air regulations. New Hampshire DES issued temporary permit TP-0198 on January 12, 2017. This permit included all applicable state and federal air regulations at a major source of hazardous air pollutant emissions. EPA has designated 187 chemicals that are classified as hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. A major HAP source has the potential to emit greater than or equal to 10 tons per year of any single HAP, or greater than or equal to 25 tons per year of combined HAPs. This does not necessarily mean that the facility has emitted more than 10 tons per year of a single HAP, but that it has the ability to do so. Methanol is one of the raw materials used to manufacture biodiesel, and it is a hazardous air pollutant. Key components of TP-0198 were to install a thermal oxidizer to reduce emissions from the manufacturing process by greater than or equal to 98%. The permit also required the facility to develop and implement a leak detection and repair program, and the intent of this is to reduce fugitive emissions. The thermal oxidizer was installed and started on June 30th, 2017. White Mountain Biodiesel ceased operations on August 11, 2017, and then recommenced operations on April 4th, 2018. New Hampshire DES conducted an inspection on June 21st, 2018, and I will get into more detail on this inspection later in the presentation. Renewable Fuels by Peterson purchased the facility on June 29th, 2018. TP-0198 was transferred to Renewable Fuels by Peterson on August 17th, 2018. A consent decree was entered between DES and White Mountain Biodiesel and Renewable Fuels by Peterson on March 30th, 2020. This consent decree resolved all violations from the EPA and DES inspections. It included the payment of civil penalties by both White Mountain Biodiesel and Renewable Fuels by Peterson. A portion of Renewable Fuels by Peterson's penalty was suspended, but it will become due for future non-compliance. Temporary permit TP-0265 was issued to Renewable Fuels by Peterson on July 22nd, 2020. This permit established the facility as a synthetic minor source of hazardous air pollutant emissions. And a synthetic minor source of hazardous air pollutant emissions is a facility whose emissions have been restricted to less than 10 tons per year of any single HAP and less than 25 tons per year of combined HAPs. The permit also required the facility to continue operating the thermal oxidizer and to also continue implementing the leak detection and repair program. And getting back to the June 2018 inspection, some of the significant findings were that although the LDAR, or the leak detection and repair plan, had been developed, it had not yet been implemented. The facility response was to begin implementation of the plan, or of the program, on July 30th, 2018. And this is an ongoing requirement that they're continuing to implement to this day. Another significant finding was that the initial compliance stack test had not been performed. The facility response was to conduct the stack test on August 23rd, 2018. The thermal oxidizer was tested to be 99.94% efficient, and the minimum operating temperature was established. Another finding was that the biennial tune-ups had not been performed for boilers B1 and B2, and the response was to conduct those tune-ups in August of 2018. Finally, there were several reports that had not been submitted, and these were subsequently submitted in August and September of 2018. From 2009 to 2018, White Mountain Biodiesel was permitted. They constructed the facility and began manufacturing. In 2015 and 2018, EPA and DES conducted inspections that identified compliance issues and required corrective actions. In 2018, Renewable Fuels by Peterson purchased the facility and took over its operation, and they addressed all outstanding compliance issues. Presently, Renewable Fuels by Peterson is operating, and in November of 2020, they submitted an application to implement some process changes, which are the subject of this application and permitting action. The facility is currently operating under temporary permit TP-0265. Permit is required to limit their hazardous air pollutant emissions. The current design capacity at the facility is 6.4 million gallons of biodiesel produced per year. The facility is subject to new source performance standards subpart BVA, which is leak detection and repair. Subpart BVA is a federal air regulation that requires Renewable Fuels by Peterson to regularly monitor process equipment for leaks. Process equipment covered by this regulation include pumps, valves, and connectors. If leaks are found, the equipment must be repaired or replaced. The purpose of this regulation is to reduce fugitive emissions from the facility. TP-0265 also requires Renewable Fuels by Peterson to operate and monitor the thermal oxidizer. And again, that thermal oxidizer controls emissions from the biodiesel manufacturing process. There are many steps in the biodiesel manufacturing process, both prior to and after the transesterification process. These include filtering food solids out of used cooking oil, purifying biodiesel, separating out water, and recovering methanol and glycerin at various steps in the process. In the transesterification process, used cooking oil, methanol, and a catalyst are added to the reactor. Heat is supplied and the reaction converts the triglycerides in used cooking oil to methyl esters, which is biodiesel, and glycerin. Some methanol is emitted to the gas vapor vent, which is routed to the scrubber and thermal oxidizer. New Hampshire DES received a request for a significant amendment to temporary permit TP-0265 on November 12, 2020. We then conducted a technical and engineering review, which consisted of a regulatory applicability review to determine which state and federal rules apply to the proposed amendment. ENVA 1400 is our state regulated toxic air pollutants rule, and it is applicable to this project. Renewable Fuels by Peterson submitted an updated ENVA 1400 evaluation with their permit application, which I will discuss in more detail when I review the emissions from the facility. We then prepared a draft significant permit amendment for public comment. And during the public comment period, we did receive a request to hold a public hearing, and that is what we are doing this evening, to receive comments on the draft permit. This significant permit amendment is for the installation of a white film evaporator, which will purify finished biodiesel and glycerin, which is produced as a byproduct in the manufacturing process. Methanol and dissolved air must be removed from the biodiesel and glycerin in a pre-treatment process prior to the white film evaporator. The vents from both the white film evaporator and the white film evaporator pretreatment processes are connected to the closed vent system, which is routed to the thermal oxidizer. The white film evaporator will replace the flash evaporator, which currently limits biodiesel production to 6.4 million gallons of biodiesel produced per year. The project will increase the capacity to 7.8 million gallons per year. This project will result in an increase in methanol emissions, approximately 2.7%. So this qualifies as a significant permit amendment. There are no planned changes to the building footprint or roof line, and no additional stacks or stack changes are planned. This image shows those stacks at the Renewable Fuels by Peterson building. There are two stacks I'd like to point out. One is the thermal oxidizer stack, which you can see on the right-hand side of the building. The second I'd like to point out is the scrubber stack. The scrubber stack was the biodiesel manufacturing exhaust point prior to installation of the thermal oxidizer. Since installation of the thermal oxidizer, the scrubber stack is normally in a closed position and only opens if the thermal oxidizer malfunctions or shuts down. The other stacks are for the boilers and a process heater and a bathroom vent. This is a closer up view of the thermal oxidizer and its stack. Our regulatory review for the permit amendment identified that the project triggers the applicability of 40 CFR subpart NNN. Subpart NNN is a federal air regulation that applies to distillation operations such as the white film evaporator. The requirements of this rule have been included in the draft permit amendment. This rule is very consistent with the current permit, and it will require a stack test within 180 days of startup of the white film evaporator. There are also additional monitoring, record keeping, and reporting requirements. As I mentioned earlier, EMBA 1400 is our state regulated toxic air pollutants rule. It requires facilities to demonstrate that they comply with health-based ambient air limits. There are several methods that may be used to demonstrate compliance with the rule. Renewable Fuels by Peterson submitted an updated EMBA 1400 evaluation with their permit application, and I will discuss this in more detail. Emissions from the current process are based on the August 2018 stack test results, which was conducted under a simulated worst case scenario. And then we added a 10% safety factor. The stack test simulated the production of 3 batches of biodiesel over 4.25 hours, which corresponds to over 35 million gallons of biodiesel produced per year. Therefore, emission estimates based on the 2018 stack test can be used for the planned production increase. Emissions for the white film evaporator process are based on engineering estimates and composition of feedstock materials. Based on these emission estimates, the potential control emissions of methanol are 0.87 tons per year, and that's assuming a 98% control efficiency of the thermal oxidizer. Potential emissions of formaldehyde are 0.14 tons per year, and that is based on the August 2018 stack test results plus a 10% safety factor. The main purpose of the NVA 1400 is to ensure that facilities comply with the ambient air limits at the property line and beyond. The ambient air limits are allowable concentrations established for both short-term and long-term continual exposures. They are intended to protect the health of sensitive populations such as children and the elderly. The ambient air limits are human health risk-based standards, and they are developed from US EPA's Integrated Risk Information System and the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists threshold limit values. They are conservative factors for general safety, time of exposure, and they take into account both chronic and acute effects. Air quality dispersion modeling can be used to demonstrate compliance with ENVA 1400. This is done using a computer model developed by US EPA, and it predicts the maximum concentration or impact of a pollutant in the ambient air based on potential or worst case emission rates, stack parameters, including the height, diameter, exhaust gas temperature and flow rate, and weather conditions. 5 years of weather data from Lebanon was input into the model. The model also takes into account local terrain and nearby buildings. The predicted impact is then compared to the ambient air limits to demonstrate compliance. In the event of a thermal oxidizer malfunction, we evaluated uncontrolled emissions of methanol being vented through the scrubber stack. Emissions of formaldehyde were evaluated at the outlet of the thermal oxidizer because formaldehyde is presumed to be a product of incomplete combustion. As you can see from this table, the 24-hour impacts and the annual impacts for both uncontrolled methanol and formaldehyde are less than their associated AALs, so the facility demonstrates compliance with ENVA 1400. The temporary permit contains operating and emission limitations. Hazardous air pollutant emissions are restricted to less than 10 tons per year of any single HAP and less than 25 tons per year of combined HAPs. The thermal oxidizer is required to be operated at greater than or equal to 98% control efficiency. Monitoring programs are designed to ensure compliance with the operating and emission limitations. Parametric monitoring includes monitoring the operating temperature of the thermal oxidizer. There is a new requirement in the permit amendment to monitor the flow to the thermal oxidizer. Leak detection and repair is applicable to the white film evaporator processes, and the program will need to be updated to include new equipment. Subpart NNN requires an initial stack test within 180 days of startup of the white film evaporator to demonstrate compliance with the 98% control requirement for the thermal oxidizer. The stack test will be observed by New Hampshire DES, and subsequent stack tests will be required every 5 years. The permit also contains record-keeping requirements. For the thermal oxidizer, the facility is required to keep records of the operating temperature, flow rate, inspections conducted on the oxidizer, maintenance that's performed, and also any bypass events. The facility is also required to maintain records of their leak detection and repair findings. There is also a requirement to keep records of raw material usage, biodiesel production, and hours of operation. Finally, the facility is required to maintain records demonstrating compliance with ENVA 1400, and they are required to update these records for any regulatory changes or any process changes. The permit also contains reporting requirements. The facility is required to report permit deviations, either excess emissions or monitoring parameter excursions. There is a requirement to provide an initial notification for startup of the white film evaporator. Semi-annual leak detection and repair and subpart and reports are required. A stack test report is also required within 60 days of the stack test, and the facility is required to submit an annual emissions report. We review these reports when they are submitted, and if we identify issues, we will follow up with the facility. And just, can we go back to their record keeping slide? And I should have pointed out the next one. Going forward.
Sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to point out with the record keeping, this is one of the key items that inspectors will look at when they come for an inspection, just to review all those records and to verify that the items being monitored are within the permit limits. Okay, so we can go forward now. Right. Okay, conclusions. We have reviewed the proposed project against all applicable air regulations. We have determined that the emissions will not cause an exceedance of the AALs and that the facility is able to meet all state and federal air pollution control requirements. What happens next? Renewable Fuels by Peterson may request a copy of all written comments and provide any additional comments. Within 30 days, DES will review all comments and make a decision to either issue as drafted or revise based on the comments we received, or to deny the significant amendment to TP-0265. Renewable Fuels by Peterson and the public have the opportunity to appeal the director's final decision to the New Hampshire Air Resources Council within 30 days after issuance of our decision.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. And now we will turn over to the testimony portion of our evening. Barbara?
Yes. In order to provide testimony, we will be using the same system of calling on people to provide that we did for asking questions. One difference to the process for giving testimony. We are required to document contact information for all participants that give oral testimony. For this reason, for those of you who are participating online, we ask that if you would like to give testimony, that you type in your first and last name, the party you represent, and your mailing address into the question box. For those of you who are at the town of Haverhill location, you will be asked to fill out this information on a piece of paper that will be sent to DES. I just want to let you know that the question box cannot be seen by other attendees and will only be used by DES to document attendees giving testimony. You do not need to speak your address out loud when giving your testimony. We also traditionally attempt to provide state senators and representatives the opportunity to speak first, and we would like to do so during this hearing. If you are a senator or representative and would like to be called on early in the queue, please start your question with senator or representative. and we will attempt to put you up front in the queue. We have now enabled the GoToWebinar question function. For those of you who are participating online, you can let us know if you want to provide oral testimony by typing and submitting your name and address through GoToWebinar. While the online participants are typing in their names, we will unmute the town of Haverhill location and start testimony with those people that are in person. Once everyone at the town location has given their testimony, we will start calling on people who have submitted their name through the question box. We will check back in with the town location after we have gone through the list of people that have submitted their names, so don't worry if you would like to wait to give testimony. So at this point in time, if you are online, we ask you to type in your name and address into the question box, and we are going to unmute Bridget's location and call on people. We ask that people one at a time. When you're giving oral testimony, please, we ask you to speak your name for the record. So I believe, Bridget, you are unmuted.
You want to sit where Doug is? Just give them your name. We'll give them a name later.
Susie Tan, Haverhill. I'm representing myself.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Susie. We can hear you loud and clear on this end.
Okay, thank you. I have several concerns that focus on a couple of areas. I do want you to be aware that the biodiesel plant is located between the Haverhill Middle School, which has about 320 people in it during the school year daily, and the airport, and as well as the biodiesel plant is located over our aquifer. So I'm concerned about protecting the public health and safety of the residents that live nearby, and especially those downwind of the plant, as well as the children and staff of that school. I feel it's very important to protect the impact of toxic emissions on the environment, and to also ensure the safety of pilots using the adjacent runway in light of the fact that the biodiesel plant is located in the transitional zone of the airport. My specific questions tonight are, I just wanted to get clarification from you that the stack test will be done in 180 days from installation, and then you repeat it every 5 years.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And then how is the stack test different from the emissions report? I didn't quite follow that.
It's not really different, but the stack test that was done in 2018 is the basis for the emissions estimates in this project. And then Renewable Fuels by Peterson did provide emission estimates for this new white film evaporator process.
And how are those estimates reached?
For the new process, for the white film evaporator process,
Yes.
they're based on engineering estimates. I believe they used Routes law, and then they used, they know the composition of the materials that they're going to be processing through the white film evaporator, and that also played into their emission estimates.
Okay, thank you. How are the HAP emissions being limited? And how will this be measured, and what is the baseline, and when do you establish that?
Well, the permit limits the HAP emissions, less than 10 tons per year and less than 25 tons per year. And those, the reductions are really achieved through the operation of the thermal oxidizer, which it needs to be at least 98% efficient, but it actually is more efficient than that.
Okay, and where does the waste methanol go during the pretreatment process?
The methanol is recovered and reused in their process.
So there's no waste methanol at the end of any of the processes?
That I'm not sure.
Okay, because Mr. Peterson was quoted in the newspaper as saying that the WFE and the WFE pretreatment process would decrease waste. So I'm curious to know what that might mean.
Yeah, it doesn't really pertain closely to the air emissions, so it's not really part of our review.
Okay. Regarding air quality measurement, how far out do you go? When you said, I think you referred to like at the site of the building or next to the building, but I didn't hear how far out your measurements are taken. So in other words, somebody living in the vicinity would they have an idea if they might be affected?
The stack test is done right in the stack was done right in the stack of the thermal oxidizer. So the testing is not done at a distance from the building. It's done right in that stack. The modeling that's performed does look out beyond the property line, but that's not actual measurements.
So that's like simulated data?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Okay, thank you. And is the WFE and the WFE pre-treatment process in R&D? And what is its track record?
It's not currently installed at the site. I don't know what the track record is.
And are there any other biodiesel plants presently using it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. What need or requirement necessitated this change in manufacturing biodiesel fuel?
Those are business decisions that Renewable Fuels has made.
Okay. And did I understand, so what's going to happen with the waste glycerin or the byproduct, the glycerin byproduct?
Well, one of the purposes of installing this white film evaporator is to purify the glycerin byproduct. What they do with that after it's been purified is, that's a business decision that Renewable Fuels by Peterson makes there. And it's really not air permitting process.
Okay. And so would you know the percentage of glycerin purification?
I do not know.
Okay. And then what is the process that residents should use if they have a public health or environmental concern regarding emissions or water contamination down the line in the future?
I mean, I think you can provide comments during this permit review process regarding air emissions, and we would review that as part of this permitting action. In terms of the water quality issues, I don't know. Do you know, Todd?
No, and I think, are you also asking about in the future, if something comes up, you notice something at the facility, who do you contact? Is that your question?
Yes.
I think we always recommend contact the facility, let them know, they may be able to help you out. But in addition, you're welcome to contact DES, and whether it's air or water or waste, there are a number of different complaints or notification contacts on our website, and if you end up at the wrong one, we'll make sure they get it routed. So there's different people who would handle an air emissions inquiry versus a water inquiry. So we would sort that out and have somebody contact you to respond.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have one last question, and I don't know if it actually is in your department or not, but if there was to be a fire with a potential explosion at the biodiesel plant, what would be the evacuation radius for residents in the area?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if your local fire department may be able to provide that answer.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe there's other people at the town, so we'll continue with.
Yes. Doug Henson, I live at 576 Airport Road. My house is 500 feet away across the road from the biodiesel. I'm directly downwind from the biodiesel. The stacks and vents are level. The top of the stacks and vents are level with my second story of my house. I'm concerned about the spills and emissions. Once in a while, they blow off. At one point, when they first started producing biodiesel, they spilled out onto the field, killing the grass. I guess it wasn't a real hazard. But my concern is I'm never notified when these accidents or spills occur. In 2018, I was sick of smelling the smoke, and I contacted the police and DES. And the DES, I guess, contacted the EPA, and they were visited, which was good, but there was no follow-up. I never heard anything from DES or the EPA as to what happened, what was done to make the facility compliant with some of the issues. My concern is how can I protect my family from the emissions? And to what degree or amount of emissions is it safe for me to stay in my home? Another question I have, can the stacks be combined? Can the vents be combined and extended higher to hopefully diffuse the emissions and get them away from the school and residences? I have a concern over the entrance ramp of these tanker trucks turning off from the Business Park Road. And turning sharply and going downhill, I'm concerned there could be an accident. Perhaps a tank could get punctured. I'd like to be notified in the event of an emergency. I'm wondering if the biofuel is mixed with the diesel at the facility, or whether the biodiesel is just trucked from the facility and added later. I guess I've given you enough questions. Maybe you could respond to the questions I've come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. I know there was quite a list of questions, and I think we're recording this, so we'll have them for posterity. And I just note that we won't respond to every question here during the hearing. If there's something that we know and we can clarify and answer a question right now, we'll do it. But for the most part, purpose is to get questions, comments, testimony for us to consider in making a final decision. So I think some of those fall into that category. But if there are any, Sheila, that you can answer quickly or point to a section of our decision where the answer is no.
Is there a process whereby I can be contacted in the event of a spill or emergency at the plant?
In air, we're not really in the spill response realm.
And I would say I'm not aware for other programs of something similar. If DES became aware of a situation whereby it was appropriate to notify people, neighbors, someone in the area, then emergency measures be undertaken, maybe by DES, maybe with emergency management, maybe with police. But there is not a routine system that I'm aware of where people can sign up just to be notified of any type of event. And that's what I know right now. Again, we'll research a little bit more so we can get a more thorough, thoughtful answer or response, when we issue the final decision.
I'd just like to make the comment, I don't think their track record is very good in regards to spills and compliance. That's all I have, I guess, at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other people at the Haverhill location?
There should be at least one other person, I believe. Bridget, I think you mentioned.
There's one more.
Yep.
Hello, John Tuthill.
Mr. Tuttle, go ahead.
I think the presentation and the testimony of the two people before me have covered a great deal of ground, and well done. I do have a number of concerns and a few questions, some of which can be addressed in written testimony. I'll just run quickly down them. I am concerned about the distance to the school property boundary, and believe that in the decision that certainly should be indicated, particularly as there may be people in that population who are chemically sensitive and there are odor issues. I didn't see anything in the material on One Stop showing the dispersion or the plume in terms of the modeling work that was done. I may have missed that, but if that's available, that would be good to see. And also any material on a health assessment. It does look from what has been presented this evening that given the standards that you are operating under, that what is being proposed will be within those standards, but I do think there's concern about the degree of testing, the frequency of testing, how comprehensive that will be, as we've seen at other facilities in the state, and whether we really can be assured that those standards are being met regularly. I had a question about something on page 2 of the application in the discussion. And there's a reference to a secondary material legitimacy assessment, and I'm not sure what that is about, but I think that it may have to do with the disposition of residue. And I think the answer to the question earlier about what happens with residues, whether they're either recycled back into the process or otherwise disposed of, I think the answer to the question points again to something that is a chronic problem at DES, which is that the various departments and divisions and bureaus are somewhat siloed. And I'm concerned that there is not adequate discussion with the water division and the waste division. And a further question about that has to do with the final product that is leaving the site and what the fuel quality standards are. I realize this is outside of the purview of Air Resources, but again, it's part of taking a comprehensive view. It would be, I think, good to address in the decision something about fuel quality standards, because presumably these fuels will be burned either in transportation or for heating. And I think the public needs to know who is regulating that and what standards are applied, whether they're federal, state, or both. Another point, which I think came up in some earlier testimony this evening, is the need to clearly spell out the consequences of failure to comply with permit conditions. Again, to get back to siloing, whether there are other permits in place, is there actually a solid waste permit for this facility? Are there groundwater permits in place? I think that should be indicated in the decision as well, so that we're not just looking solely at air emissions, but taking a complete view here. So I will close with that. I would like to ask the Air Resources Division to deny this permit at this time, primarily due to the location. I think that sometimes we get going with these projects early on, a location is selected. Pretty clearly from the presentation this evening, there have been compliance issues over a number of years and response has been quite slow. I think if you were to start this again, you probably would be looking for a location that was not adjacent to a school or to residences, over an aquifer, or adjacent to an airport. And with that, I'll close and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is that the end of the people testifying from your location, Jennifer? Is it Jennifer? Bridget, sorry, Bridget.
Hi, this is Bridget. I just want to make one comment. There was a comment made about the height of the stacks, and those stacks have been a significant issue. The height of those stacks have been a point of contention in the area due to the airport and adjoining neighbors. And so I just want to make a comment that you did mention that in your presentation, that the height of the stacks is something that's looked at. And so if the DES could require the biodiesel plant to do an aviation study to determine the height that those stacks can go to and have those stacks extended to that height, that the town would be appreciative of that support.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got that comment taken. At this point in time, if there's no other pieces of testimony from the town location, we can turn back to Barbara to see if there have been any requests to testify online. Thank you all for participating.
Yes. I have only one person that typed in a question. They did not give their address information. It's Urza Mann. I will unmute you so you can give your testimony, but I would ask that when you're done giving your testimony, if you don't mind just typing in the question box your address just for the record. You do not have to speak it out loud. If you could type it in for us, that would be helpful. But Urza Man, we are going to unmute you so you can give your testimony.
She's self-muted now.
Apparently you are self-muted, so make sure you are not muted on your end.
Or using the phone.
No, because she typed, she has to be in there because she typed something in the question box. You're not hearing.
Maybe while you're trying to figure out the muting.
Yep.
The stack question came up a couple of times, and again, we'll provide a written response. But when we talk about in Sheila's presentation, like we look at the stack heights, we would look at what the applicant proposed for the stack heights, and we'd only be looking at the stacks that are pertinent to our air permit. As remember in the picture, there were a number of stacks. The two, I believe, that we looked at, the scrubber stack and the thermal oxidizer stack. And for example, if Renewable Fuels by Peterson proposed, we want our stack to be 30 feet high, and we checked that against the air requirements that we're looking at, and that was, it passed, the permit would say 30 feet high. We wouldn't then say, well, you should go to 40 feet to be, to address some other issue. And relative to it being next to an airport, so an airport, there may be FAA regulations that say the height can't be higher than a certain amount. We may say it has to be some, and the facility would be obligated to comply with both. If we said the stack had to be 40 feet, but FAA only allowed them 30, we would not give them a permit for 30 feet. They'd have to do 40 feet or find some other method to comply with both situations. And just in addition, we fully recognize that there's a school next door, residences very nearby, other businesses in the airport. And just a general note about the standards, and in particular that chapter 1400 toxics rule that Sheila mentioned in the presentation. That the standards in there are set up presuming that there is someone who could be exposed, either could be a school, could be a residence, nursing home, but essentially beyond the property boundary of the facility, regardless of where it's located, we assume that there's a daycare or something is there or could be located there in the future. So those types of situations are considered in the standards that were set. And did I take enough time?
Well, apparently, Urza Man, according to what I'm seeing, it says that she has left the meeting. So.
And I show that she's offline, so
She
she would not be
did.
able to talk.
Yeah, she did type in comments into the question box, so I believe those will be on the record, but she didn't type her address. I believe.
They did send me an email.
So, okay, so we have her email address, so we can get in touch with her if we have. I can read her comment out loud if you
Yeah,
want.
I think it would be good because I'm not sure they're.
Yeah, just let me read it out loud for the record. It says, in 2020, DS fined White Mountain Biodiesel and Renewable Fuel for Peterson for emissions, not performing tests, and not keeping records. In 2021, Massachusetts DES fined Renewable Fuels for the same issues. How is New Hampshire DES going to keep Renewable Fuels in compliance? She also wrote, with respect to Mr. Henson's question about notification, how about the 300 plus kids and staff at the school whose responsibility is to notify them? I'm guessing that means in case of an emergency. We did not have anybody else. Oh, there's a man did give her address. I wonder if she's back with us. Can try unmuting her again. Or we try. See, Urza Man, are you with us now? Would you like to speak? Nope. We have, Urza Man is saying that she can not unmute and she's having connection issues. So if you can hear us, Ms. Mann, we do have the opportunity, you can submit written comments for up to a week after the hearing, and we will reach out to you to make sure that your comments are submitted for the record.
Also, might let the change phone number. Call see if you don't.
Yeah, she says she can't maintain her connection long enough to get audio. So
Oh,
it
okay,
might
so
be.
it's probably not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Show that she's offline.
Yeah, it shows that she must be having issues. The only other person that has submitted a question was actually our DES person, Karen Craver, who has offered to say a few words if you want to unmute her. Karen, I'll let you introduce yourself to the group and let them know who you are. As soon as you're unmuted.
As soon as I get to her name.
Yeah.
It's really slow. Okay, she's good.
Okay,
Okay.
Karen, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to put our environmental health program out there as a resource to people. I heard some questions earlier about who you could contact if you do have questions about public health. And I wanted people to be aware that we do have an environmental health program at the Department of Environmental Services. We have expertise in the areas of epidemiology, toxicology, and health risk assessment. And if people do have public health related questions, I'd be happy to be available as a resource to hear those questions and communicate with the right people throughout our department to be able to get those questions answered.
Hello, can you just give us your name one more time?
Sure, my name is Karen Craver. My last name is spelled C-R-A-V-E-R. I believe that my contact information will be included on a later slide, and if not, perhaps it can be sent out following this meeting.
It will be sent out following this meeting. Thank you, Karen, for your comments.
At this point, I'm not seeing anybody online that is submitting anything to us. Is there anybody else at the town who would like to give any additional testimony?
No, at this time, we're good. Thank you very much for tonight.
I think back to you, Sherry.
Okay, thank you all. This concludes the testimony portion of tonight's hearing. We thank everyone for taking the time to participate. I would like to make a couple of notes before we officially close the hearing. As stated earlier, we are extending the deadline for public comments 1 week until 4 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. And also just to reiterate on the process moving forward, once the public comment period is closed, DES has 30 working days to review all of the comments and issue a final decision. All those who registered for tonight's hearing and those who submitted written comments will be provided with a copy of the final decision via email. It will also be available on the DES website. So this concludes tonight's hearing. I am officially closing the hearing at 7:18 p.m. and thank you all again for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you close it out, it'll end the hearing.
Trying to find my mouse.
We can see it on
It's on the screen.
Oh, okay. I can't see it on here.
Ta-da. Bye.
I mean, I can close it out.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
end web, I have the ability to end webinars.